A warm welcome back to the World Economic Forum here in Davos. I'm very excited to say I'm joined by the UK Chancellor George Osborne. Chancellor, thank you so much for joining us. David Cameron, in the last hour or so, said that if Europe's about ever deepening political union, then it's not the organisation for us. Would you agree that the back and forth and the discussion over this EU referendum is harming the UK economy?
Well, I don't think it's harming the UK economy because the most recent numbers this week show we're creating jobs and employment's at a record high and we're getting a lot of investment. Do I think getting this relationship right for Britain with the European Union is important to our economic future? Yes, I do. And what the Prime Minister was saying and what we're saying as a government is let's reform that relationship. Let's allow the Eurozone to pursue, if they want, that ever greater political union. Britain doesn't want to be part of it, but within a reformed EU and with proper protections for countries like Britain that aren't in the Euro, we can have that European Union.
So you disagree, actually, that for corporates in the UK, they're concerned about investment going forward, given there's still an uncertainty over which way this is going, particularly given the polls?
Well, as I say, the evidence at the moment is the investment is flowing into the United Kingdom from around the world.
I'm talking about corporates in the UK investing.
Well, actually, again, business investment is up in the UK. But what I would say is this. Is this important to the UK's long-term economic future? Yes, it is. We've got to get this question right. We've got to get the reforms right. You know, our argument is reform the European Union, make sure that Britain is more comfortable inside the European Union by protecting, as I say, countries without the euro, making sure we're not part of ever closer union, make sure we don't have welfare tourism, achieve those sorts of things and make Europe itself more competitive. And then it will be actually a big boost to investment. And that's exactly what the negotiation is all about at the moment.
We've seen a number of analysts downgrading their estimates for growth in the back end of last year towards the sort of first half of this year. In particular, we see pressure on sterling. We've got the market now pushing rate hikes out for the UK economy until 2017. What's creating that uncertainty if it's not concern about the UK economy, if it's not the referendum? Do you put it all down to external factors?
Well, the IMF had their latest forecast this week, and they did downgrade the world economy, but they didn't downgrade the UK, and they kept the UK forecasts where they are, and along with the United States, we're set to be one of the fastest growing of the advanced economies, but clearly we're a big, open trading nation. We're probably the most open of all of the big G7 economies. And so you do look with some concern at what's going on in global markets, and it does present something of a dangerous cocktail out there. I think that there are answers to it. I mean, first of all, in countries like the United Kingdom, we've got to go on making the reforms we're making, sort out our public finances, make ourselves more competitive, invest in the long-term infrastructure of the country and the like. And then I think internationally we need a bit of a sense of perspective, which is, you know, underlying all this volatility are some transformations and transitions which are fundamentally good for the world. China becoming a more consumption-based economy, energy being cheaper with new supplies, whether it's Iran or shale oil. In the European Union and in the Eurozone, we hear today, you know, the European Central Bank ready to do as central banks in Britain and America have done when economies are weak and step in and support the Eurozone. So, you know, I think it's quite important behind the volatility to look at what's driving some of this volatility, and they're fundamentally quite positive trends.
So investors are just getting it wrong here?
No, I think, look, because of the very sharp falls in the oil price, the markets are unstable, and obviously falling oil prices affect different countries and different companies in different ways. But fundamentally, again, for most Western economies and for most emerging economies, not all, a fall in the price of energy is a good thing. So, you know, I think that's, you know, this is, of course, an anxious time for investors. People see the stock markets moving around. I think the job of policymakers is to keep their eye on the ball and their eye on, you know, what are the long-term plans we need to implement. And that's the way you can give confidence in periods of very short-term volatility.
Do you think US politics plays into this to some degree as well? I think for the global economy, the big concern here is that the US economy is slowing, and then they look to the leadership in the US and they see actually in a few months' time we could have Donald Trump as a Republican candidate, if not the President of the United States. And given the comments that he's made, actually, it's incredibly concerning. Are you concerned about the prospect of Donald Trump in power in the US?
Well, thankfully, I'm only responsible for my own democratic system.
They're a trade partner.
Rather than taking on responsibility for the United States. And no, US voters will make their own decisions. I mean, of course, one of the challenges for the United States has long been the case that the most powerful and effective arm of government has been the Federal Reserve because of the gridlock in the Congress and the administration. And I think, whoever is the president, whoever is in charge of the Congress in a year's time, what you want to see is more effective coordination between the two. Without picking runners and riders in the presidential election, although, some are even better candidates than others, if I can put it like that, that's what the rest of us want to see. And the United States out there concluding trade deals in the Pacific, looking to conclude a trade deal across the Atlantic. Those are big positive signs for us.
I'm going to throw Germany into the equation now. The German finance minister suggested in order to help finance the refugee crisis, we could look at a EU-wide tax increase on fuel. How do you feel about that prospect? And do you think he's trying to hand the referendum to the Vote Leave campaign?
Well, look, what he's suggesting is that in Germany, that might be an answer. I would say in the United Kingdom, actually, we meet our international aid obligation. We're in fact, we're the only large economy in the world that contributes 0.7% of our national income towards international development. So we don't need additional resources for international development. We can deploy those resources that we thought, and we thought this through in advance. Let's have a generous and powerful aid budget, and that is being deployed in and around Syria. So after the United States, Britain is the second largest donor to the refugee communities in Jordan, Lebanon, Turkey, and so on. And for the size of our economy, we are the largest donor.
I want to move on to talk about technology here and the UK tech space in particular. There was a huge buzz around the UK tech scene, but why do you think the UK hasn't managed to replicate the success of the likes of Google or Spotify? Why haven't we created our own yet? And what more do we need to do? Well,
look, Britain, I think, is the go-to place for tech in Europe. I mean, there are other good places like Berlin and Stockholm and so on, but I think London, with Tech City, has become a magnet for investment. Britain is the most online of all the Western economies in terms of the way we do our shopping and the way we conduct our social lives and the like. So, there's a huge amount on offer in the UK. Question, why has there not been a big British or indeed European tech firm of the scale of Google and Apple and whatever? I mean, it's a good question, although, of course, there have been leading Brits involved in building those firms, like Sir Johnny Ive and so on. I think it might be something to do with the fact that Europe's not been able to create a digital single market, and we're working hard at trying to do that. Frankly, I think it's all taken far too long. It's far too slow. But if you could create that digital single market, you'd have 500 million odd customers to sell into. So I think in the United States, the initial home market for some of these tech companies has been, of course, pretty substantial. Look, I don't think it's the only reason. I think the United States has had a more entrepreneurial economy than many European economies. Hopefully that's changing in the UK, and we're starting to make ourselves the go-to most competitive economy of all of the Western economies.
I agree with you on an EU scale. We need to do more about the digital market, but for these UK specifically, what more do you think you can do here?
Look, I think there are a couple of things. I mean, first of all, you've got to make sure the kids have the right skills, so, hire the right people. As of last year, we are teaching computer coding in schools across the country. Not just how to use applications, but actually how to code. That's a big step forward. Second thing we're doing is we're supporting individual clusters. London I mentioned, but there are Edinburgh, Dundee for video games. Leeds is also an emerging tech cluster. And I think government can play a kind of directive role in putting the infrastructure in and make sure the broadband's fast enough and so on. We got generous tax breaks for the guys and girls who are successful at building their businesses in the UK. And then I think a particular UK advantage is potentially fintech. Obviously as the world's largest financial centre, we have a lot of financial expertise, and the companies, not just the big banks, but all of the financial firms in the UK have that financial expertise. Combine it with tech, and you've got fintech. And I think the most exciting things happening in fintech in the world are not happening actually in California, they're happening in the UK.
Sir, thank you so much. The UK Chancellor George Osborne. Louisa, on that note, I'll hand back to you.
Thank you.